Today we are going to be revisiting a few graphics cards as well as focusing on the 4 higher end cards from both Nvidia and AMD. And from AMD's side we have the RX 9070 XT as well as the RX 9070. And then from Nvidia's side we have the RTX 5070 Ti as well as the RTX 5080. And this particular model I'm holding in my hands is the Aorus Master, and Aorus, for some reason, they wanted me to check this card out. But then when I got it in, I realized the prices of the RTX 5080 right now are absurdly high. And so we're going to factor in, of course, street pricing as the single most important factor in today's review and look at these cards. And so although the 5080 Master is a really cool card, in terms of value, at least in this current market, it's actually really poor value for money. So let's get into this comparison where there are 2 winners, one from each side of the fence, both from Nvidia and AMD, and we'll get into that with side-by-side video footage of these 2 cards up against each other right after today's video sponsor.
Never pay full price for Windows 10 or 11 again. With today's video sponsor, VIP STD Keys, you can get activated with the Windows 10 IoT LTSC license, which will last till 2032. Also, don't forget to use the coupon code TYC for a massive 30% discount. And there's also Windows 11 Pro too. Links in the description below.
Welcome back to Tech Yes City, and let's get into today's comparison here, starting off with Final Fantasy 16. Now, we are going to be focusing on 1440p and 4K results, where I feel like if you can afford a graphics card like any of these in today's comparison, then you can step it up with an extra $20 with a 1440p monitor over that of a 1080p monitor. I think 1440p monitors are really inexpensive, and of course, 4K monitors have also become much more affordable than even a few years ago. Though let's go into Final Fantasy 16 here. This is a game that favors the AMD cards more, and so here we see the RX 9070 XT scoring a victory over that of the RTX 5070 Ti, both at 1440p and 4K. Moving over to Black Myth, Wukong, here we've got 1440p high settings and 4K high settings presets. And what we see here is with 100% screen resolution, that is no upscaling, we've got here a neck and neck comparison. Then moving over to Warhammer 40K Space Marine 2, here we've got a victory for the 5070 Ti at both 1440p and 4K. Now with the RTX 5080, I have included 2 different sets of results here, as you may see in the graphs, with the Master and the Founders Edition. And we'll talk a little bit about the Masters towards the end of the video, but really on this discussion of performance, although it seems good, when we look at that price performance, and especially a 5080 class card in itself, is really doing poorly as we mentioned before. Moving to Cyberpunk 2077 Ultra settings here, both at 1440p and 4K, the 9070 XT ever so slightly edges out the RTX 5070 Ti. However, going back to Marvel Rivals, here is where the 5070 Ti scores a comfortable victory both at 1440p and 4K. Then moving on to Fortnite, here is where we have, with the latest updates, the 9070 XT is scoring a comparative victory over that of the 5070 Ti, both at 1440p and 4K, by the way. Then moving on to the last title here, Riftbreaker, which does incorporate some ray tracing, at least in the benchmarks I'm doing here, just because the FPS numbers are just so high, even at max settings. And here's where the 5070 Ti scores a victory at both 1440p and 4K. Though, of course, this is where we're going to look at the value charts straight with these numbers. And what we've got here averaged over the games is you'll see with the current street pricing, which I feel is the most important thing to look at, is how much you can get these cards for at any given point in time. And right now, when I'm looking at these prices, the 9070 XT on AMD's side of the fence is commanding a significant premium over that of the RX 9070, which is a far cry from what we were promised on the original launch day of $549 and $599 respectively for these cards. At least with the RX 9070, we're getting a price that is much more closer to that of its MSRP, coming in at roughly $600 on Amazon at this point in time. And then when we look at the Australian pricing, where I'm doing this review from currently, we can see that the pricing here is pretty much mirroring that in percentage terms differences with the US. So it's pretty much the same story in Australia as it is in the US, meaning that the RX 9070 XT is commanding a significant more premium in terms of percentages over its MSRP than the RX 9070. And this makes it so that it's actually poorer value when typically they should be really around the same value with their MSRP price points. But then we go over to the Nvidia side of the fence, And things are good and bad here, with the 5070 Ti actually coming in at a pretty decent price, only $30 above its MSRP of $750. And so that makes it actually one of NVIDIA's best value cards at this point in time. Considering it's got the 16 gigabytes of VRAM too, it's actually not a bad buy. Now, unfortunately with NVIDIA's side, if you want to play, say, with more performance in general, the RTX 5080 has an insane premium over that of the 5070 Ti, not just in its raw prices on the street, but even with its MSRP. But the fact that it goes so much higher over that MSRP than the 5070 Ti, which makes it so that I cannot recommend the RTX 5080 at this point in time, especially for gamers, where this card actually carries double the decoders of the 5070 Ti, which is why it can be appealing for video editors especially, or people who need to utilize those decoders. But in terms of encoders, it's got the same dual encoder as the 5070 Ti. So really, you're getting extra performance and extra decoder. But then when we look at the value for gamers, it's actually abysmally bad right now. And you can just see this with the charts here, how poor it is at this point in time. And then that's with a card that's actually around 1,250 USD. And again, in Australia, it's actually the same story, where the price premium is significantly higher than a 5070 Ti, even outside of the MSRP, which then makes the Aorus Master, and here's the worst thing, this coming in with a huge premium. In Australia, it's roughly 700 Australian dollars over the cheapest 5080. And then in the US, it's roughly a 250 USD premium just for this Aorus Master card. Now keep in mind, in a perfect world, this Aorus Master, if it was say 100 USD more expensive than the $999 price tag that NVIDIA promised, then it would be a pretty solid buy. It's got extremely good cooling performance, which I can show you a side-by-side versus the Founders Edition, and also sporting the fact that it's got a 25% power limit max increase there, so people who really want to get overclocking can do so on the Aorus Master. Not to mention, the card does look pretty cool with its RGB effects. Though outside of that, if you are a gamer, I really cannot see the point of paying such a high premium for the 5080 versus the 5070 Ti at this point in time. And so with that card out of the way, we can then look at the other three cards. And what we see here is, if you're looking for the best value for just pure rasterization, then the RX 9070 on the higher end is going to be what you're looking for. And then if you're looking at NVIDIA's side, the RTX 5070 Ti is going to be your choice there. Now, in particular, if you're looking for the RX 9070 XT versus the RTX 5070 Ti, you're going to be roughly getting around 3% more performance. Not a huge factor, they actually trade blows, but of course the ray tracing performance will be a lot better. Here's where I've turned on ray tracing and some of the 4K numbers that we did in a couple of the games here. And you can just see, although the performance significantly tanks, which is why I actually rarely use ray tracing in games personally, which makes it so that the drop-off of performance is actually favored towards NVIDIA, where it's losing less of a percentage in terms of its FPS on these heavily ray traced games than that of the AMD counterparts at this point in time. Now, of course, there's DLSS 4 on NVIDIA's side, there's FSR 4 on AMD's side. DLSS 4 is much more widely supported at this point in time. But keep in mind, for a regular desktop install, you are going to have to install on NVIDIA's side the NVIDIA app. And me personally, I actually dislike the NVIDIA app at this point in time. I feel like it adds this blanket of input lag to your user experience, which in a separate video coming up very soon, I'm going to show you guys how to get the best performance install on an NVIDIA graphics card, where really it only takes about 5 minutes to get this going, and it's just going to mean a stutter-free experience on NVIDIA's side. And then on AMD's side, you really don't have to do anything to get a stutter-free experience. And so they're both really good cards in terms of looking at the 0.1% lows, and that's really crucial, especially if you're playing some of these competitive online multiplayer titles. And with all that out of the way, the final thing that we haven't touched on yet is the undervolting, the power consumption, and the overclocking. And we'll get underway with the power consumption first. Here's where all four of these cards that we talked about here, they do have pretty good efficiency out of the box. I'd say that the RX 9070 is AMD's best, and then the RTX 5070 Ti and also the RTX 5080 Founders are NVIDIA's better cards. The 5080 Master, of course, does have that higher performance out of the box, but it does burn more power for it, and I'd say it burns it in a more inefficient manner. Then moving through to undervolting, here's where all four of these cards, they do exceptionally well, and in fact, I did a different undervolt on the 5070 Ti versus the 5080, just to show that you can do a lot with undervolting. And with AMD's side, the undervolting does really well in Warhammer Space Marine 2. But keep in mind, I find that the NVIDIA undervolts are more consistent in terms of just having a profile that will work on all games. With the AMD cards, I do find it depends on what you're doing, but in that case, you can set up profiles for individual games, as people have mentioned in the comments section before, and you can apply those profiles when you play those games, so then you can get the most out of AMD's side of the fence. Now with overclocking, it's also a pretty similar story across all these cards here. You do get more performance, however, you will use up more power, and the Master in particular does use up even then some over that because it does have a 25% power limit in gauge, which already out of the box, it's using more power, but then when you overclock it, it uses even more power. And this is quite a lot of power, just considering we're looking at only the GPUs in this graph. And that about wraps things up for today's video, looking at all of these graphics cards. Do let us know in the comment section below which of these cards would you get and why. And for me personally, it'd be on AMD's side, RX 9070, the non-XT, that's coming in at the best price for AMD's cards at the moment. Then on the NVIDIA side of the fence, it's the RTX 5070 Ti. But keep in mind, that said, I would like to see all of these cards that we're talked about in today's video just come at MSRP again. So NVIDIA and AMD, please make that happen. And then we can get back to more normalized recommendations, as opposed to the recommendation here, which is kind of looking at the street price of the card and where it lies from month to month. And if you're in the market for one of these GPUs, look at which has the best street price versus the MSRP, and then pretty much go for that card, regardless of whether it's AMD or NVIDIA, because once you tune up both the cards on a driver side, OS side, they actually perform really well. Anyhow, do let us know in the comment section below what you guys think. Love reading your thoughts and opinions as always. And with that aside, I'll catch you in another tech video very soon. Peace out for now. Bye.